to be on, Paul.
Yes, sir. All right, a couple of things. Got two things I want to talk about. I want to talk about what happened yesterday with, what I would call carefully crafted language trying to mislead people. But the first thing I want to talk about is how right you were back when they hired this tax consultant, and you said this is ridiculous. We have in-house resources. Then it came out that the tax consultant, who was fired 2 days ago, was a raging liberal, lifelong Democrat, contributed to Democrats. And so I just want to say you were correct initially. It was a waste of time, waste of money, and we now know that is a true statement.
Yeah, and I mean, Paul, I'm wrong a lot. I make mistakes, but down there you have experience. But first, let me say, now it's early in the morning. I'm a farmer. I get up early, and the first thing I have to, check, you would think would be the farm. And I'm a poultry cattle farmer, so you have to put up with a lot of, let's say, stuff. Unfortunately, I have to put up with political stuff. So the first thing I get up to is Jamie Barker, the spokesman for the Asa Hutchinson. I hope they're listening. I tweeted with you. I hope they're tuning in, and I hope they're listening. Mm-hmm. So they sit there, and they're trying to get in some little spat about the convention and Trump and Jan Morgan. Okay, forget about the budget and money. They're in a little fourth-grade squabble or something. I'm like, I didn't even get into it. I don't even care. What I care about is, Paul, in 2016, when John Gilmore was cashing big checks off the taxpayers, Asa Hutchinson was going out there and telling people, if we take people off Medicaid, we're going to save money. We're going to have if Brian King, if we reduce people off the Obamacare expansion, it's going to hurt the budget. And now he's flip-flopped and said the same thing. So I sent John Gilmore and Jamie Barker a question on Twitter. Say, since Asa Hutchinson is saving all this money, why? I asked him, who is the all-time record biggest spending governor for the time they're in office? Who is the all-time biggest record spender? Let's see when they come up with an answer. They're on Twitter. The second thing, who is the all-time biggest spender of Medicaid? Now, Asa Hutchinson is going out there and trying to tell people he's saving money, folks, cutting costs. That's what he's saying. So I just posed those questions. Let's just see how long it takes them to answer with the answer. And I gave them a hint. I tried to help them out. They know it.
Well, I mean.
So anyway, but on the tax farce, everything. What I said in the paper originally was, before you hire consultants, which sometimes needs to happen, folks. It sometimes needs you. Exhaust all resources first. I've been down there and experienced. You know what? Jim Hendren doesn't listen. He's always on Twitter, sitting there saying, "Oh, I'm so tired of these people criticizing, and don't come up with solutions." Well, first off, Jim, that's part of the job. I've never once complained about that in 12 years that people complain to me. Okay, so Jim does this. He don't want to listen. And what Jim Hendren sits there and says, I said exhaust all resources first. Use what resources before you stick it to the taxpayers. Jim Hendren doesn't do that. He's tried to stick to taxpayers for $300,000 more money. Okay? Didn't listen, doesn't want to listen, just messes up, screws up. And then in the paper, literally, he's talking his head off trying to spin his way out of it. Well, we got some good information, but they were wrong on some other stuff. What I said in Twitter last night, and I haven't heard anything from Jim, is Jim was a mechanic out there, and he was fixing your tires. What Jim is saying is, folks, you drive off the lot, and on your 4 tires, 2 of them fall off. You've paid him $100,000 to get it right. And he's saying, well, hey, you know what? 2 of the tires stayed on. So, I mean, it just, folks, it's a regular thing. If you're driving down the road and you're going to work, and 2 of your tires fall off, and Jim Hendren put on all 4 of them, he's going to sit there and tell you, well, 2 of them stayed on. So, once again, it's just how they waste money down there foolishly, and then they go and lie and spin it. Like, they did in 2016, and now they're trying to do now.
And I think all this really does is expose, that the task force way of governing is just not responsible in turn. I mean, I think
misleading to see.
Yeah,
that's what it is.
Our constitutional legislative branch, the entire body should be debating and making these decisions, not having them trying to be the rudder to give people this choice architecture. And that, meaning, well, here are our choices, and all these choices are acceptable to us because we're this select group of legislators that are, debating these things. And that's what
I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
All right, good morning, everyone. Thanks so much for being with us. I hope everybody is getting to work safe. I know we have some... obviously some winter weather that has moved through the state, and we've got some still moving through the state. So this is Conduit News Radio. You found the intersection of conservative ideas and reality. My name is Paul Harrell, and hey, if you want to text us or give us a call, feel free. The number 870-275-9799. We got a lot of news to get to today. I want to start with a story that was out, I guess last week, and we didn't really cover it, but I've been holding on to it because I think it's there's some other stories that really complement the crime problem that we do have here in the state. And so John Moritz writing last week, this was back on the 11th, that there was a plan to fund Arkansas prisons. So that last week you had these budget hearings down at the Marble Palace, and lawmakers were not, according to this article, they were not too happy with the lack of funding, that they want more funding for, our corrections department. They want to hire more officers and things like that. So essentially how this worked was the governor has an executive request. We talked about this last episode as well, because with the budget hearings going on, you had the Department of Health in some cases saying things like, hey, well, we spent 12 last year, we asked for 16 next year, but we were granted $30 million in potential spending ability. A lot of people have been scratching their heads about this. Oh, and I do have an update on that story, by the way. So you know how we had people on our Facebook page yesterday, and we're broadcasting facebook.com/Conduit News. I do have an update on that. Some people were saying, okay, well, if they admittedly passed the executive recommendation for the Department of Health without the cuts, because they couldn't pass the motion to amend and reduce spending authority. Then they tried to pass the budget as is. They didn't have enough senators there. They didn't have a quorum of senators in order to pass the budget. So they just did a voice vote that was, at the very least, it was a close voice vote, and they passed out ACE's recommendation and said whatever. So some people on Facebook were saying, how can they possibly do that when they've admitted that they didn't have enough people there, and yet they did a voice vote? And so I did a little research on that, because people were saying that needs to be investigated. There needs to be some sort of consequence for, violating what many consider to be, sacred concepts of democracy. Well, it would require, from what I understand, somebody on the Joint Budget Committee to protest. And there's, avenues to do that where you basically say, hey, look, this is illegitimate. And this is not, we can't let this stand. But it's got to be, I'm told it would have to be somebody who is on the committee to do it, where they pass it out without a quorum. We'll see if that happens. But back to this. So that was the Department of Health. This has to do with the prisons, the spending plan for our prisons and corrections and that sort of thing. Some, according to this, some legislators already saying that they want additional funds to hire more probation and parole officers. So the governor's requested appropriation, which the Joint Budget Committee acted on, Wednesday includes new funds dedicated towards paying overtime for prison guards, medical care for inmates, and rolling out a new effort to put low-level offenders in treatment beds. So we've been talking about this for a little while, and the main guest that we've had on, they've probably been talking about this for a year now, if not more, is Senator Brian King. Now, Senator Brian King came on. He mentioned a little bit about this, I think, last week, but he was just talking about how we have this crime problem and how we do need this is a main goal. We have to address these things. And how right now we're doing a pretty poor job of it because we do have this uptick in crime that nobody really wants to talk about here in Arkansas. And I'm going to give you an example here in just a minute. But there's a larger principle at play here that I think we need to discuss, and that would have to be the concept of government abandoning the basic things that we all agree it should be doing. And one of those basic things would be keeping criminals behind bars, especially violent criminals or thieves or things like that, behind bars, serving out their full sentences, not just a little bit, but their full sentences. But because we don't have the money, we have people that are not serving out their full sentences. Now, I want you to think about this for a second. The government is really good about growing, and one of the ways the government grows is it invents new responsibilities for itself. It invents new ways. It says it has to take care of us, right? Barack Obama said it best when he criticized the Constitution of the United States by saying that it is generally a document of negative liberties. It says what the federal government can't do to you, but it does not say what the federal government must do on your behalf, which that whole sentence, if it says it doesn't must do, well, who's deciding what it must do, and who are you to decide what it must do? I mean, that very idea is essentially saying we have to work outside the confines of a limited government, right? And so nationally, I'll give you a good example of what abdicating your initial responsibility looks like. Okay, and this is again to use Obama as an example. Let's invent a new responsibility and claim that everyone in this world is born enslaved to one another when it comes to health care. Okay, we're all born enslaved. Like, I'm going to have to pay for your health care, and you're going to have to pay for mine. Of course, that we know that's not how it works because there are some people that they earn more than others and that sort of thing. But the idea, like, we're going to invent, and we're going to invent a new responsibility. It's going to base around this concept that health care is, in fact, a right. We're going to invent a new right. And at the same time, we're going to continue to completely abdicate our responsibility to secure our border, which is like a basic concept that's been around for thousands of years, that a country, in order to be a country, you have to have defined parameters in order to set up a society where you have predictability, laws, and that sort of thing, jurisdiction, enforcement, and that sort of thing. Okay? Now, so think about that for a second. This is what governments tend to do in our modern age. They abandon and they do a really poor job at the things that we all think government should be doing. A really poor job at it. And they don't dedicate the adequate resources. And this is one of the reasons Donald Trump is president now, because people, whether they've ever articulated it the way I'm articulating it, this is what they do. And so we have a government that wants to invent new responsibilities when it can't even do the current ones correctly, the ones we all agree on. Now, bringing that back to Arkansas. So here in the state of Arkansas, we have decided to overcommit ourselves to a welfare program in the form of Medicaid expansion, Obamacare, and Asa Hutchinson has chosen not to lead us out of Obamacare, as most every Arkansan would stand ready to support him if he would choose to do so. He has chosen to not lead us out and end the program. He wants to continue it. Wants to operate in this weird, I think it's just a disconnect from reality where he's going to make the program more conservative. And he's doing all of this Well, at the same time, we have a crime problem that's rising. We need more funds. If you're going to talk about spending money, we need more funds to keep criminals behind bars so they serve out their full sentence. Okay? And we're not doing that. Okay? Let's take it, because we've overcommitted ourselves, we don't have the money for the things that we all agree on. Let's take it a step further, okay? Let's just take it, instead of prisons, let's think about roads. Look, folks, I'm not a big government guy, but I think, hey, okay, the government's going to spend our tax dollars on roads. This is a good thing. It gives us the freedom to travel in many ways with ease. It gives us an economy where you have people that are able to get goods to market, where people are able to freely exchange, and it actually promotes commerce. It promotes economic freedom, and I think all of us don't want to drive on roads with potholes and stuff. Now, I don't want to raise new taxes to fund those roads, because guess what? We're already giving the government money to do these things. They are just choosing to invent new responsibilities when they can't do the ones we all agree on well, like keeping criminals behind bars or funding our roads. Now, you have to admit, this is making an incredible amount of sense here. It just doesn't really get through to the thick bubble that is the Marble Palace and the establishment, the Republican Party establishment down in Little Rock, or in Little Rock. So, all that being said, let me give you another example, okay? And this actually, full disclosure, I have a family member who is good friends, okay, with the victim in this case. You probably heard about this. But speaking of our crime problem, listen to this. Back in October, we had this headline. This was 5 News Online. Arrest made in Friday's Fayetteville home invasion. This was October 2017. The Fayetteville Police Department, 5 News confirmed with the Fayetteville Police Department that shortly before 1 p.m. on Sunday, October 15th, the Washington County Sheriff's Office arrested a man in connection with the home invasion on River Meadow Drive that happened Friday, October 13th. Lentonio Jenner, 25, was booked into the Washington County Detention Center. So let me just break this down for you, what this guy did. There's the first victim is going outside. He's outside, I believe he's in his driveway, tinkering around, and this man, Lentonio, comes up, essentially, forces his way inside, or comes inside, has a gun, gets the couple, gets them in their car, and is demanding that the couple take him to an ATM machine. I just did that whole ATM, and that'd be AT machine. But anyway, you get to take him to an ATM. And so in the process, it's a very terrifying event, and miraculously, okay, the male in this instance, the male victim, is able to fight in the car and wrestle, and he gets bit on his arm really, really bad, but he's able somehow to open up the door and kick this guy out, okay? But this was a violent attack, and I'm sure psychologically, I would have to imagine something like that happened to me. It would be psychologically unnerving as well. But it's a very tragic event. Matter of fact, I think there's a better write-up. I think I'm doing a poor job describing this. Let's go to the next story, because it's got more details about this Lentonio Jenner facing felony charges of kidnapping, aggravated robbery, and residential burglary, second-degree battery, and terroristic threatening in connection with the matter that reportedly happened on River Meadows Drive. About 2:45 Friday, October 13th, police were dispatched to the area. So there was a shooting. An elderly man told police he was outside in his driveway and approached by an unknown man whom police later identified as Jenner. He also reported that Jenner brandished a gun, demanded he go inside his home and get his wallet and car keys. An elderly woman was also inside the home, and Jenner allegedly forced them at gunpoint to give him a ride to the bank to get their money from a bank account. Once, at Huntsville Road and River Meadow Drive, the man reportedly grabbed a gun he had hidden in his vehicle really shortly before this incident, by the way. Jenner allegedly bit the man on his hands and arms and grabbed the gun, but the man was able to push Jenner out of the car and drive himself and the woman to safety. Meanwhile, Jenner was taken to Washington Regional Medical Center for treatment. There, he was arrested and placed on a prisoner hold until he was stable enough to go to jail. Once released from the hospital, because I think, he was shot in the leg, Jenner was shot in the leg and then kicked out of the car. I mean, can you imagine this? Can you imagine? You have a 25-year-old versus what is described in this article as an elderly man, and somehow, thankfully, he had a gun. He had a good guy with a gun trying to defend his family. Once released from the hospital, he was booked into the Washington County Detention Center. Jenner, listen to this. Now, here's where it gets interesting. You want to talk about our crime problem, okay, and how we are abdicating our responsibilities other places and inventing new responsibilities for the taxpayers that none of us agree with, okay, or not a vast majority agree with. Jenner is suspected of another robbery in Fayetteville that happened back on January 3rd. So this was October 13th of last year. Rewind to January 3rd, he's implicated in a robbery of Arvest Bank. He, an alleged accomplice, Telvondrick Haywood, reportedly stole $13,615 in cash. According to a police report, other suspects may have been involved, and they're suspected of possibly being involved in 3 bank robberies, 2 other robberies, and attempted robberies at 3 restaurants. Now, here's the thing. 4 days after the alleged robbery, Jenner was arrested in Florida while vacationing with his family. Jenner's trial was initially supposed to begin October 9th, but was rescheduled for December 11th. While being held in connection with that crime, Jenner allegedly broke a sprinkler head, causing substantial disruption, court documents state. So what this article doesn't say is that this guy was let out on bond. So you get arrested for a bank robbery, and then you get out, and then you go to Florida, and then they arrest you in Florida, they bring you back, you get out again, and then you try to rob a Fayetteville couple at gunpoint, and you bite the guy's arm. How is this happening? Somebody, tell me how this happened. This is ridiculous. Okay, we do have a crime problem, and here's an example. And if you don't believe me, it's very simple. All you got to do is go and look up. There are public sites to do this. You go look up arrest records of this particular individual, Mr. Jenner here, and you can figure out that you can piece together. Okay, so they had him here, they arrested him here, and then somehow he got out. Then they arrested him again, and then he got out, and then he almost murdered. I mean, if we're honest with ourselves, he almost killed an elderly couple in Fayetteville. So my point is, we have to have a government that does the things that we can all agree on, the vast majority of us agree on, like allowing criminals to go to jail, okay, and stay there. But if we want to do that right, we have got to stop inventing new responsibilities that over-leverage the taxpayer. Because I mean, honestly, you think these politicians are going to come out and say, we messed up, Medicaid expansion was a huge mistake? No, because they've staked their political careers on it. But you know what they will say? They say, we got to raise your taxes, keep your state safe, fund your roads. And they'll demagogue it, but they won't admit that they're abdicating basic governmental responsibilities while adding new ones that we simply can't afford. We got to take a break. Back in a minute.
If you're like me, you believe that small business is the heart of Arkansas's economic engine, and it should be viewed that way by the politicians in Little Rock. Conduit for Commerce also believes, like you and I believe, policies that achieve less regulation and lower taxation help small business in Arkansas thrive. Other policies like small, constitutionally consistent government and reducing citizen dependency on government keeps it from growing and expanding its influence on our daily lives. Conduit for Commerce works every day to educate the general public and legislators on these important priorities in the name of Arkansas small business. By the way, contributions to Conduit for Commerce are tax deductible. Log on now to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Contact Us on the right side of the page. That's conduitforcommerce.org. Go there now and learn the facts on protecting small business in Arkansas.
In Arkansas, every single hour there is a politician not getting what they want. For some, it's an absolute nightmare. The sleepless nights wondering if progress will ever come. Lying awake pondering how to grow government in this political climate. Asking questions like, why don't my constituents want to pay a few cents more in taxes? Everyday politicians feel abused and neglected. These politicians are starving for power. They're hungry, confused, and they don't understand why no one seems to care. Will you be a patriot and commit today to help these poor, starved for power public officials? It's simple. All you have to do is commit to stay silent and never dissent or stand in the way of your politicians' rise to power. Never speak up or get engaged to stop the growth of government. By committing to these simple steps, you will ensure that life of your politician will be filled with contentment and the respect they are desperately seeking, as well as campaign contributions from lobbyists.
This message brought to you by Aristocrats Serving Arkansas.
PHP Parody. Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is building a liberty machine. Find out more at conduitnews.com.
All right, folks, welcome back. We're kind of wrapping things up here. It's an interesting week. You know, you had a lot of people who were out of school yesterday because of Martin Luther King Day. And then now we've got a lot of winter weather across the state rolled in last night. Some of it's still coming in. And just an interesting start to this week here in January. You know, the one thing I noticed about Martin Luther King Jr. Day yesterday was there was, for the first, I can't remember it being this way, but I saw several articles of people out there reminding, you know, everyone about, you know, Dr. King's murder. You know what I'm saying? And a lot of people, at least more than normal, you know, a lot of times, and rightly so, if it's focused on, you know, his dream, judge someone based on the content of their character, not the color of their skin, which is, if we're honest, it's something that the left in this country has completely, in many ways, abandoned from their argument. They don't, and that's not every. I'm talking about the radical left. That's not everybody, but that's, you know, that's very sad. But I think, interestingly enough, a lot of people, some of the articles I saw more than normal were saying, here's a guy that spoke out for change and was murdered, was killed for it. And that's just an observation. And I noticed a few pieces out there where people were reminding the population that you had somebody who was speaking out against the status quo, and he was killed. And, I mean, if anything, it just kind of reminded me, you know, when you speak truth to power, sometimes it, you know, you get reactions like this. We got to go back in just a moment. these task forces really end up doing. And so I think this exposes that as being flawed, considering the fact that a Republican majority state hired a lifelong Democrat to head all this stuff up.
Yeah,
I mean,
Obama-loving Democrat, absolutely. And maybe, and the thing about this with Jim Hendren is he doesn't listen. Just like on the campus carry, enhanced carry, whatever debacle, Jim said, I pulled Jim back there. I said, Jim, you know what, you're going to get what you want. I said, let's just try and work and debate it in committees. Let's try and work it out, see what we could do. And I told him, I said, I may wind up voting for it. He refused. They refused. And then that's why you got embarrassment of guns and SEC football games. That should have never happened if you're running legislation correctly. And we're talking about gun legislation and how foolish and carelessly. But on the consultant part, again, this is all misleading to see. Folks, they've got to get in your – they have misbudgeted so badly down there and prioritize Medicaid over everything else. That's why we have a crime crisis. Two things Asa Hutchinson never said yesterday. He never addressed the crime crisis. Oh, he came up with some little bitty things. Folks, it's not even going to be close to making our streets safe again, okay? And the second thing is he didn't address highways. When you're driving to work today, guess what? Asa Hutchinson has no solution for highways. And he continues to spend more in Medicaid. Finally, a Democrat Gazette headline.
Yes.
Telling the truth. Asa Hutchinson spending more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so now that makes it his first year he increased spending $130 million, his second year $140, his third $160, and now for his fourth
election year
$170 million. And then they had the audacity to try to manipulate the voters, and his office is claiming he's cutting $100 million when which is a complete deception. He's cutting.
Lying.
Yeah, it's just a new projection. Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, that's people don't like to use that word, but that's exactly what's going on here.
That is exactly what's going on here, and the thing about it is with Asa Hutchinson in this bunch, they don't want somebody telling the truth. They're going to try and undercut you, do every type of dirty politics, and it's just sad what's going on. And repeatedly in 2016, I was in the newspapers. I knew the facts of the budget, and I tried to meet with Governor Hutchinson. I'd say, oh, Brian King's mean and everything. I would try to be nice. I was in the newspapers. I sent text messages to staff people. John, it's all there, buddy.
Mm-hmm.
For a medical mile.
Bringing you your daily dose of truth. It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Real quick, the last thing I'll say about Martin Luther King, I know that was yesterday, and we briefly mentioned that, but one thing I failed to mention was this was, I guess, the first time where because of legislation last year, you have Martin Luther King and Robert E. Lee no longer celebrated on the same day because, of course, nothing honors Dr. King's legacy like not being able to honor a white man and a black man on the same day. That's the I'm sorry. That whole thing was the biggest, I don't know, man. It's just pretentious. For those of you that don't know, last year, and really the year before that or the session before that, there's been these attempts to separate Robert E. Lee and Martin Luther King, and of course Democrats have been under the legislature. They were control of the legislature for 138 years, and all of a sudden Republicans come into office and they feel like they have to prove that they're not racists. That's really just adopting the mainstream media's argument that they are, and so they bend over backwards and they say, well, we've got to separate these days. We got to separate the Martin Luther King, Robert E. Lee Day. It's just a travesty. And, of course, there were Democrats that were like, yeah, okay, this sounds like a good thing. And what's interesting is everybody knows that on the left and these movements like this, you're not ever going to appease the left. It's not like you separate Martin Luther King Jr. holiday from Robert E. Lee's holiday, and all of a sudden you're going to end disagreements. As a matter of fact, this goes right in line, and Asa Hutchinson was a huge supporter of this, by the way. You need to understand that. Asa Hutchinson was a huge supporter of separating these 2 days because it's a way for the leftist media to give him some sort of recognition that is it's hollow and meaningless. These people that want to sanitize our history, these people that want to remove Confederate monuments and things like that because they hurt people's feelings and they make people feel uncomfortable or whatever. That's the same mentality as separating Martin Luther King and Robert E. Lee. And Governor Asa Hutchinson was a big part of that. And the left is not going to stop. And we have evidence of that. Last year, the stories broke last year that not only after they separated Martin Luther King and Robert E. Lee Day, the left now wants to take down the Democrat Party wants to take down Confederate statues across the state, and they want to put them in museums. It belongs in a museum. There was a closed door meeting that was described to me later as pretty comical because they told Asa, they said, Asa, if you support separating Robert E. Lee and Martin Luther King Jr. Day, they're going to come next. They're going to come for the Civil War monuments that are on the grounds of the Capitol. And I'm this is an indirect source, but I was told that the governor said we have Civil War monuments on the Capitol grounds. And surely, what's really funny is you can see one of them from the governor's office window. So that's the first thing. And then, of course, you've got that one star on the flag of the great state of Arkansas that actually stands for the Confederacy because those the 4 stars on that flag in the middle there, it actually stands for each country that Arkansas has been affiliated with. And lo and behold, there was a bill filed last session. There was a bill filed that wants to remove the affiliation of the Confederacy with that star. It was a Democrat that filed it. And I think instead, I don't know what they want this. Was it Native American or something they wanted it to represent? I can't remember. My point is this idea of editing history accomplishes absolutely nothing. Matter of fact, it's actually very scary because, in my opinion, it may condemn us to forgetting our history and learning from it. Instead, it may actually put us down the path to make the same mistakes again, just in different ways. And that to me is very upsetting and worrisome. But tell me what you think. Honestly, you feel free to call us or text us. Tell me what you think. Sound off on Facebook, facebook.com/Conduit News. Because I think I'm onto something here. I think the concept of separating Martin Luther King and Robert E. Lee was just the same mentality of these social justice warriors trying to tear down statues. I mean, do you remember that one video, Joe, where this was back, I think maybe it was after the Charlottesville tragedy and everything that happened last year, but there was a group of there was basically a mob of millennials that tore down a Confederate statue. And by the way, they don't want to stop there. They want George Washington. They want Thomas Jefferson. And it's a shame that we have Republicans that aren't able to see this. Instead, they're breaking their arms, trying to slap themselves on their own back. Yeah, we're not racists. We're not racist. We're Republicans and we're not racist. We ended Martin Luther King and Robert E. Lee on the same day because you can't celebrate a white man and a black man on the same day, and that's the best way to honor King, But they tear down this statue, and then you have all of this hate and all of this like aggression from these kids, and they start kicking the statue, and they start like they did everything but like pick it up and do a pile driver on it. They were kicking it. One woman clearly broke her foot. She was kicking that statue so hard because she walked away limping. And it was all for the cameras. And they look like a bunch of, grown individuals playing, I don't know. They probably look like I did when I used to, pretend to be a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle growing up.
Yeah, I remember this video specifically because we laughed at how ridiculous it was because people were spitting on it, cussing out the statue like it's a real person, flipping it off like it's going to hurt, like you're going to hurt its feelings.
Yeah, they were flipping it off.
And then
I forgot about that.
I remember this one specifically because I pointed this out. There's this guy, if you watch it closely, he looks directly at the camera going, oh, man, I'm in the camera. I got to do something. And he goes up and just, like, curb stomps the statue as hard as he could. Clearly hurt himself because he walked away a little bit. It was like, oh, man.
Yeah, these are not the most athletic types.
They have nothing better to do with their time.
They're not actually. It's like, you guys, if before you go to your next George Soros-funded protest, and you need to make sure, and you're going to rip down some statues, you need to make sure to stretch those ankles. You know what I mean?
These are the kids that were putting bubbles these are the people that got putting bubbles when they were kids to protect them. You're just so perfect. You're never going to do anything wrong. So they never do anything wrong.
They also, when they got their participation trophy, it was bubble wrapped.
Yeah.
So to protect them from sharp objects. Exactly. So they're very. Very sensitive, these guys. Anyway, that movement is tied in with the same mentality. And so I can promise you, the governor and other Republicans that thought this was a good idea, they never stopped to think about this concept that the left isn't going to be satisfied. Okay? And just like removing Confederate statues does not end racial disagreements, does not end disagreements, period. You know what I mean? We're always going to disagree, okay? And when I said racial disagreements, I don't mean, you know what I'm saying? You would think, okay, if we can just get rid of the idea of slavery, if we can just get rid of it, everything will be fine, everything will be happy, and we won't ever have any problems again. And that is just not the case. And before we move on, and I didn't mean to talk about it this long, but I can tell you one of the reasons why this younger generation is having such a problem with slavery in America and everything else. And it's because they, like us, are able to recognize injustice. They can look back and say, man, slavery is an awful thing. It's terrible to treat another human being like that. But they don't know how to reconcile it. They do not know how to reconcile an imperfect world. As a matter of fact, they're so upset about this injustice that they can perceive, but they don't know what to do about it. They're actually yearning for perfection. And I would argue from a biblical standpoint, it's a perfection that they can only find in Jesus Christ. Right? But that is what we're seeing here. Is they're able to recognize an injustice, and they don't know how to reconcile it. They don't know how you can have something that is produced good things, but it's also failed many, many times. Right? They don't understand how you can have this amazing society that we have in America, and you have all of these, whether all the prosperity, but they don't understand how this prosperity came from flawed people who made bad decisions sometimes, who supported institutions that we now look back and see as evil. And maybe this generation, maybe this millennial generation that's curb stomping statues, maybe they'll understand someday, 20, 30 years from now, that they were supporting an institution of abortion, of mass murder, which was essentially fundamentally the exact same thing as slavery. Because slavery was about who's a person and who's not a person under the United States Constitution, and that's exactly what abortion is. You have you have a baby, you're not a person under the Constitution. And now we're deciding arbitrarily, not based on science. Okay, life at conception. This is a life. That is scientific. By the way, if you ever hear a liberal tell you that life doesn't begin at conception, just ask them to repeat that little phrase, life at conception. Because if you found a fertilized egg on Mars, the headline tomorrow would be life found on Mars. Right? So, but maybe these social justice warriors and the curb stomping statue crowd and everything else, let's flip off, let's hurt the statue's feelings. Maybe eventually they'll realize, oh, wow, you know what? Most of us supported this idea of abortion, and we were supporting it just like other people were supporting slavery, and they thought there was nothing wrong with it. They thought, oh, this is just the way things are. Just like today, there are tons of people in this country that just feel like, you know what? If you get pregnant, it's your body, and you can do whatever you want to with the life, the innocent life that is inside you. Something to think about. There's really close. Matter of fact, I would suggest you that it's the exact same thing with slavery versus abortion, because you're deciding what has value in an arbitrary fashion, under our laws. So anyway, I did not mean to spend this much time on this. So let's reset here, because I want to come back and I want to talk about what I would consider carefully crafted language, carefully crafted articles about hunger in Arkansas. There's been some new reports released on that, and I want to talk about that when we come back. So don't go anywhere. You're listening to Conduit News Radio. My name is Paul Harrell. Good morning to you. Back in a moment.
This is ASA News, The Parrot. With breaking news from the Capitol in Little Rock. I'm Bob Maloney. There are reports circling around from politicians who are in the know, and the same phrase keeps being used. That phrase is new revenue generation. Let's go to our reporter on the ground from the Capitol, Haley Hogwash. Haley?
Thanks, Bob. Yes, it seems the more politicians I talk to, the more I hear the phrase new revenue generation. We're trying to figure out exactly what that means, but you can rest assured it will be good for the people of Arkansas.
Haley, it certainly sounds like something good. I like how the phrase uses the word generation. That makes me think this has got to be doing something positive for our children in the future. Haley?
Yes, Bob, some new developments. I've just been speaking to some people who are here and are not politicians, and they tell me the phrase new revenue generation is actually code for a new tax.
Oh, my. Well, if this is true, Haley, that would add to a growing list of new taxes that have barely made any headlines at all, so it's best not to discuss them here on ASA News, The Parrot.
Yes, Bob, I know it's sure to make government officials angry that their phrasing of the new revenue generation has been changed by the people and called a tax increase.
I would expect an announcement from Mother Government soon to set the record straight. What is the new tax? Revenue generation, Haley?
Well, this new tax, a new revenue generation would add to a growing list. First, there was a revenue generation on movies, books, and songs that people download using the internet. And next, there was the tax increase. I'm sorry, Bob, the new revenue generation on all purchases made using the internet. And now I'm told this new revenue generation is a tax on the people's patience.
I realize the people don't like it, Haley, but specifically, what is the new tax? Revenue generation.
No, Bob, I'm telling you, according to the activists here at the Capitol who have gathered and are listening to some radio broadcast, the revenue generation is literally taxing the patience of the people of Arkansas. I'm told the less patience you have with the government
better not tax our patience.
The more they will tax your patience and the more money you will owe at a later date. I'm also told the collection method on taxing your patience will be decided in a newly formed multicolored ribbon task force.
How taxing.
PHP Parody.
Epigenetics and the sins of the father.
Determined to drain the swamp in Little Rock, it's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Did you see you got Republican candidate for governor Jan Morgan? She was in Van Buren. Was it Van Buren last night? Is that where she was? I'm sorry. I must not be accurately reporting things. Anyway, she was. Hang on one second. The reason I wanted to bring this up real quick was I saw this Facebook post by Jan Morgan that I found was fascinating, and I do not doubt it. Okay. But she wrote this about 19 hours ago. Clinton. Okay, yeah. She was in Clinton, Arkansas. Well, this is interesting. Listen to this. Speaking of Clinton. In Van Buren County. Okay, in Van Buren County in Clinton. Okay, right. All right. Van Buren County, right. So she writes this. I've been told that running for governor against the Republican version of the Clinton machine will be nasty. She then goes on, she wrote, someone is working hard to hack into my Facebook account, likely to delete my social media pages. Now, first of all, you got to understand, Jan Morgan has a massive social media presence. She reaches a ton of people, not just within the state of Arkansas, but nationally, because she goes on Fox Business and Stuart Varney's show and everything else. She goes on to write, Facebook has sent me 10 security alerts by text and email within the last hour. Then a message of too many failed login attempts. Go figure. Here we go. And she posts screenshots. So somebody has been trying to hack in to Jan Morgan's Facebook account. Because her biggest strength are the grassroots activists that she has access to, that she can get her message to. And the message is this: Asa Hutchinson's liberal voting record. There's a fantastic meme that's going around that talks about, Asa's biggest problem is the truth. Essentially, the truth getting to the people is going to be his biggest problem. And it's absolutely the case. So, anyway, Jan Morgan running for governor, making her rounds. And listen, if you've never heard her speak, let me just tell you, it is a victory in and of itself that the conservative movement has another choice to vote for, that somebody stepped up, and that somebody's Jan Morgan. But if you've never actually heard her speak and you get the opportunity to go and you get the opportunity to hear her, you need to. Because number one, if there's a conservative bone in your body at all, I think you're gonna make the obvious choice. But number two, you're going to have confidence in the direction that we need to go. It'll actually get implemented. Because she's extremely articulate, extremely sharp, and she wants to listen to the people. She wants to listen to the everyday average Arkansan, and not just patronize them with ads saying it's if you go look at Asa Hutchinson's campaign ads. Okay, go look at them from last. Maybe we will later in the week. We can play some of Asa Hutchinson's old campaign ads, and you can just. I mean, the word platitude. It was just these generalities. He claimed the reason Obama was trying to defeat him was because he's against Obamacare, and of course he wasn't against Obamacare. He continued it here in the state. I mean, you can go and then he had an ad for school choice. And, of course, he fought school choice up until the backlash was going to be swift. And then he said, no, I support the school choice bill. That failed. By the way, speaking of that, on Thursday, next week is school choice week. And we will be talking, thanks to the Reform Alliance, with Dr. Howard Fuller on Thursday to kind of preview what's coming up next week for School Choice Week. School Choice is a huge plank in the Republican platform, and they couldn't get that done. That was defeated last session. And look, the governor's office officially, they will tell you very sternly that the governor supported the school choice bill. And that may, in fact, be the case at the end of the negotiations. But originally, I mean, you should talk to some of the school choice activists down there and the lobbyists, quite frankly, because they were very upset. All right, so the telephone number, 870-275-9799. Okay, so real quick, this was a fascinating article. I probably need to spend some more time on it. Carefully crafted article, if you will, about how the state's working poor are facing hunger. You ever see articles like this? This is an important article because when we come back, we're going to be talking a little bit about the famous liberal columnist here in the state, Mr. John Brumman. This was written, though, by Emily Walkenhorst, and she writes an article about a study about how does Arkansas face up when it comes to hunger, and how Arkansas's working poor are facing hunger. 13.5%, they say. Listen to this: 13.5% of the state's working population is considered food insecure. Food insecure. The U.S. Department of Agriculture defines food insecurity as a household-level economic and social condition of limited or uncertain access to adequate food. I just thought to myself, adequate food. Well, so who defines what adequate food is? You see, folks, studies like this are done to show that the government is not doing enough. That's why studies like this are done. The government is not doing enough, but it all goes into how you define hunger. It all goes into how you define. I mean, you've seen those comparisons when they'll compare what poverty conditions are like in this country versus what poverty conditions are like in our country, and there's no comparison. A poor person in America is one of the richest people in the world comparatively. It's like, well, what's adequate food? Well, our country used to think that if you were going to go on government assistance, adequate food was, here's some cheese and here's a bag of rice or a bag of beans, and that's adequate food. That is not the case today. At least that's the feeling that I get. So, then it goes on to... essentially, this whole thing is crafted in a way to let you know that the government's not doing enough. And it goes on to highlight, two cases of Arkansans who are single moms who do have jobs, but they don't get child support. One woman said she didn't qualify for food stamps. I'm wondering, okay, but what other benefits out there? See, the article doesn't necessarily list. There's a ton of benefits out there. What other benefits might these people be on? And if you pair this article with one earlier, this article was written on the 14th of January, but last week you had this one on the 10th of January. Arkansas woman gets 33 months in fourth sentenced for food fraud. Theft put at $1.3 million. These are the cases where you've got Medicaid getting scammed. You got people saying, we provided X amount of meals to little kids, and they never, ever provided the meals, and they're just getting reimbursed. So within the context we have of this whole crisis, if that's what you want to call it, we've got people defrauding the government.
This is 101.3 FM News Talk KBTM, Jonesboro, an East Arkansas broadcasters station.
John Gilmore, Asa Hutchinson, you little minions, if you're out there listening, it's all there. And you know what? I tried repeatedly, out of the goodness in trying to work together and say, Governor, no, the facts are we are not saving money in traditional Medicaid. We are spending far more than ever. And then yesterday, Paul, I'm going to post the video up. Duncan Baird couldn't answer the questions. He just got a $19,000 raise. He makes over, you guys going to work out there, guess what? Do you get to go into your work and sit there and can't answer questions? No, that's for somebody else. The budget director for Governor Asa Hutchinson, who was there and supported Obamacare expansion, right there with his buddy John Burris, making over probably salaries and benefits, I'm going to give a range of $120,000 to $150,000 a year on video, folks, saying, I can't answer that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
A budget director, when he's with budget questions, paid somewhere between $120,000 to $150,000 of your tax dollars, could not answer the question.
And the question was simple. The Hutchinson administration used to say that reducing Medicaid rolls would put a hole in the budget. Now he says it saves us money. You never got a straight answer. Now, I'm told that in the afternoon...
Never got any answer.
Right. You never got any answer, and he didn't have the numbers as to why all of a sudden there's a big flip-flop. I'm told in the afternoon, Senator Hickey asked a similar question and got Cindy Gillespie to actually admit that reducing Medicaid rolls will save the state money, which is like, oh, wow, why are they finally admitting that?
Cindy Gillespie, that's great news, folks. Cindy Gillespie in 2016 came on and backed Governor Hutchinson up. That's news right there, folks.
And so now she's saying it will save us money, so that should open the door to say, okay, well, if we got rid of the program, how much money would we save? I mean, it's for able-to-work adults. How much of this theater that Asa's trying to act like he's...
Theater lying. Let's say he's not lying. I'm saying lying.
Well, isn't that what actors are? So how much of this theater that's going on really has to do with Jan Morgan in the primary coming up in May?
It has everything to do with saving and sitting there and trying to say everything. Let me tell you, Asa Hutchinson is a bad lawyer. He's trying to flip-flop and say, he's defending something that he did, is guilty of in the newspapers, irrefutable evidence out there. And he somehow got election year, and he's going, I got to say something different. I didn't I didn't commit those things back in 2016. He doesn't even want to have to answer it or go through it. And fortunately, I got a few minutes before they try and cut me off. But Duncan Baird just proved everything. And if Cindy Gillespie is on video of saying that, she's also on video of backing Governor Asa Hutchinson, another big paid bureaucrat. So, they have some, they're caught.
Yeah, they're changing the narrative, trying to change. They're not really trying to change direction. They're just trying to change, the carefully crafted language and how they word it. I got a text message, somebody ask Brian, what would happen to Arkansas's budget if the federal government raised the portion of our contribution for the expanded Medicaid population?
They're already going to raise the portion in each year that we're doing. Let me tell you something, folks. I already know the answer right now. It would devastate. And you take in 2020, which Congress may change up there, folks. We had, a window of opportunity in 2015 to start reversing that. Asa Hutchinson didn't listen. He refused to meet with me. John Gilmore, if you're listening, you were cashing big checks off the taxpayers. Help Jamie, who was new. I'll say Jamie's new. Jamie seems like a nice guy, and he's in this. So, guys, answer the questions on Twitter. Let's just get the folks out there. John, you were cashing big checks with the governor at the time, okay? Duncan Baird has cashed big checks off the taxpayers since he's been down there since 2009, okay? He was joint budget chairman during this time when him and John Burris were holding hands and raising up and celebrating the fact that we were going to save all this money in traditional Medicaid.
And it's all the facts bear out. Everything that they said this program was, is the opposite. I mean, it's everything we said it was. It's a big government disaster.
But who's better? Duncan Baird.
I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
Hey, folks, it's the intersection of conservative ideas and reality. I'm Paul Harrell. Thanks so much for being with us. Good morning. Hope everybody is making it to work okay with the winter weather that has affected a large part of the state. I think still affecting it. I got into work okay up here in my neck of the woods. So mostly powder. So the phone number, 870-275-9799. Coming up at the bottom of this hour, what do you guys think of special elections? Folks, on this program, we've been talking for a long time. Special elections are just used so that government can grow and get what they want, which is higher taxes. I'm going to give you an example of that up in Springdale coming up, but then I'm going to revisit one of the biggest daggers to the heart of limiting government last year, and that's when State Representative James Sturch of Batesville, with a maneuver of legislative sleight of hand that Conduit caught and presented, killed special election reform to the delight of everyone at the Municipal League and anyone who wants to grow government and continue to thwart the will of the people when it comes to these low turnout numbers that you get in special elections. So we're going to be doing that at the bottom of the hour. Joe, you got that audio ready for the bottom of the hour?
Yeah, I got it. Real quick, I was looking. Okay, so I have my phone in front of me, and I have the Facebook Live playing on my phone, so I can keep up with comments and stuff.
Yeah, of course.
With our viewers. And when you brought up special election, like, what do you guys think of special election? A bunch of angry faces just washed across the screen. I thought it was quite funny.
Hey, well, you know, the folks on Facebook, it's facebook.com/Conduit News. You guys are the diehards, and you guys are very well informed, and I certainly appreciate you taking the information that you hear and see on this program and you know, spreading it to everybody else. So, okay, John Brummett, the columnist, an opinion guy for the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette, who's, you know, been doing this for a long time, and he has a body of work that is very easy to define as a liberal, progressive, Democrat-centric perspective, right? He fully adopts, John Brummett fully adopts the concept that the people on the right are not compassionate, and the people on the left are with government programs and that sort of thing. Okay, it's kind of old, you know. It really is, but that's the whole concept of okay, you know, if Republicans get what they want, or if the right gets what they want, they're going to throw people out of nursing homes and that sort of thing. Okay, so that's why it has been so weird these last 3 years, because John Brummett has been very supportive of Governor Asa Hutchinson. And I can't be the only one to notice this, but there may be politicians right now listening to this program, state politicians, that haven't noticed it. But I would encourage you to go back and read as many John Brummett articles as you can since, you know, Governor Asa Hutchinson was elected back in 2014. And it has been praise for a Republican governor. It has been, you know, as much as John Brummett can praise somebody, that's what it's been. I've pointed it out many times. What is going on? You would think the likes of John Brummett and others would be, if there was real reform, the reform that the people of Arkansas has actually been voting for, they would have articles critical of the change because, I mean, folks, elections are about ideas. And so we've had these debates, we've won elections, and yet the ideas don't get implemented. So the last couple of, I guess in the last week, there have been two editorials, there have been two opinion pieces by John Brummett. This one is very interesting because he actually is addressing the thing that I have been talking about for a very long time, and that is John Brummett's friendly attitude towards Asa and his policies. His headline was endorsement ? And he goes on to detail how people are saying that, you know, he's sticking up for Asa Hutchinson. He says Governor Asa Hutchinson has probably enjoyed all the help from me he can stand. Again, John Brummett, whenever I've written that Hutchinson has been a solid right-winger from the time I first started covering him 3 decades ago. Okay, so this article he starts as kind of a defense of saying, look, I'm not a defender of Asa Hutchinson. He says, I've been writing that Asa Hutchinson is a solid right-winger from the time I've been covering him 3 decades ago. But listen to this next sentence. But that he has carefully and craftily practiced pragmatism and competence as governor to keep state services met and avoid needless fodderall on issues like bathrooms and guns at Razorback Stadium, his ultra-right critics apparently have seen instead something along this line. Headline, liberal creep at newspaper, defender of Democrats for decades, loves Asa because Asa is no different from Democrats. Yes, that is exactly what I have seen. So he is right. And that is exactly what has happened. It's not only what we have seen, it is the reality because, again, elections are based on ideas. If the ideas of the Republican Party were actually being implemented, Governor Asa Hutchinson would be getting criticized left and right. Not the literally left and right. I mean, from the mainstream media, he would be getting criticized from just every mainstream media outlet you can think of because government would be shrinking. And they subscribe, again, to this idea, Republicans, if they get what they want, it means poor people will suffer. That's their whole concept. That's their whole idea. Okay. So let's see here. He goes on. He mentions Donald Trump, whatever. Okay, so then he mentions Conduit. A wealth-endowed outfit based in northwest Arkansas, John Brummett writes, called Conduit for Action, which is to the right of the Koch brothers, has been assailing Hutchinson for months for not cutting taxes enough, not cutting spending enough. Well, he hasn't cut spending, so let me say that again. He hasn't cut spending. He's grown spending by over $600 million, with his new budget projections included in that. So, you know, he's grown the size of government. But anyway, he goes on, not throwing enough people off of health insurance and generally paying entirely too much attention to arithmetic. I wonder if the arithmetic John Brummett is referring to here has anything to do with the fact that the arithmetic that the Bureau of Legislative Research found, their own document found, that the military retirement tax cut bill to give veterans or military retirees a tax cut actually was a net tax increase on the people, meaning the government now is going to be getting about $8 million more. So it wasn't an offset. They're taking $8 million more from us because of that bill. Thus leaving the conservative revolution, he goes on, the state's voters began ordering up in 2010 altogether unimposed. True. That is an accurate, sort of accurate, except for the point of he hasn't cut spending. We've increased spending every year he's been here. So, by definition, we have not cut spending at all. Then he goes on, and this is what's weird, because I don't know of any mailers that have gone out. This is strange. I certainly know of segments I've done on this radio program. One of the group's mailers scoffed at the very idea that Hutchinson would be so hard up for conservative credentials that he'd order up a defense from me. He goes on, let's see here. Now, this is where it's interesting, because he goes on to criticize Asa in the next couple of paragraphs, but then praise him. Kind of, in my opinion, undoing and verifying everything that I've been saying, that it's very strange that liberal Democrat John Brummett is okay with Asa Hutchinson's leadership. Did anybody think, okay, Asa was elected, and Asa and Tom Cotton were both elected at the same time, right? It was November 2014, okay? And Republicans had massive victories across the state of Arkansas, right? Asa Hutchinson was elected in November 2014. Did anybody think that you'd have this string of articles of praise from John Brummett when Republicans took control? No, people thought there was going to be actual change, and there hasn't been any change. But here, let me read from this, because this is fascinating to me, okay? This is his criticism and then praise of Governor Asa Hutchinson. Listen, talking about Asa, the guy threw thousands off Medicaid expansion by having his Human Services Department send snail mail letters to those poor folks at addresses where they very likely no longer lived. The letters instructed these people to prove their continued poverty with bank records produced within 10 days of the letter's mailing, not receipt, or be dumped from the rolls. At the time, Hutchinson complained about my characterization and called it unfair. Now I suspect he's already photocopied that preceding paragraph and ordered an aide to get it to his ad agency for a campaign ad. Liberal creep at newspaper says Asa threw poor people off government rolls. The liberal creep finally got something right. Now watch him squeal. Asa has thousands more poor people in his crosshairs. Re-elect Hutchinson, end quote. But then at the very next sentence, the problem for this normally responsible conservative governor is that Jan Morgan may not be someone to be trifled with. In the very next sentence, he says that normally Asa Hutchinson is responsible, meaning he's a Republican that resists implementing the party platform he was elected on. Let me just be very clear to John Brummett or anybody else out there who may be listening. Conduit for Action is not a far right-wing group unless the Republican Party platform is a far right-wing group, okay? Every policy that you can find is firmly established in the Republican Party platform, and that those policies are they are abundant during campaign season if you want to be elected as a Republican, but they are nowhere to be found once you get into office. And ladies and gentlemen, it is to me, it's just look at the results we have. Look at the results. The fact that John Brummett has to even write an article about this very issue of whether or not he's praising Hutchinson or not praising Hutchinson, the very fact he writes this article means that there is something here, that there is a truth here, that there is an issue here where Asa is not a conservative. 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 Okay? He protects the status quo, and we have a record, a long record to prove it. I mean, my goodness, folks. He said it earlier, okay? And he mentions the guns at Razorback games. He's talking about that enhanced carry bill. Okay, that was a complete, if you want to get into the political ramifications of that, I was there. Folks, that was Asa Hutchinson begging and you know, probably propositioning the legislators to not put him in a difficult situation where he had to come out as being anti-Second Amendment. So they make political calculations on that bill, and what we have now is a terrible, a garbage bill. The enhanced carry gun bill is a garbage bill because of how they handled it. What it was in the beginning, just to let professors carry if you have a concealed, and now you got to go through extra red tape, extra training. You have the concealed carry instructors that are, and let me just tell you something. this bill, the enhanced carry bill, is on the path to just completely self-destruct because it can't function the way it is right now. And if you talk to anybody down there that knows anything, been working on this, they'll tell you that that's the truth. He talks about no bathroom bills. Folks, there were people that wanted to at least debate whether or not we should explore the concept of in public buildings, hey, you know what? We need to protect the privacy of people in bathrooms. And so if you have this genitalia or you're a girl, you go to a girl's room or a guy. Asa didn't even want it discussed, and he instructed with one of his nephews, Jeremy Hutchinson, in the Judiciary Committee. They held everything up. They wouldn't let it run, along with true Second Amendment bills, by the way, as well. So the fact that he's even mentioning this, as, you know, people say that I'm praising Asa Hutchinson. I'm not praising Asa Hutchinson. Oh, by the way, normally he's really responsible and pragmatic, and, you know, he doesn't really, allow the conservatives to get what they – well, so the real question here is how large is the Republican Party base? The base. The people that believe in limited government and don't just want it talked about, but they actually want to see it. How large is that? And I am betting it is so much larger than Asa Hutchinson or others even know. And again, the problem for this normally responsible conservative governor, to use John Brummett's words, is that Jan Morgan may not be someone to be trifled with. We got to take a break. Back in just a moment.
If you're like me, you believe that small business is the heart of Arkansas's economic engine, and it should be viewed that way by the politicians in Little Rock. Conduit for Commerce also believes, like you and I believe, policies that achieve less regulation and lower taxation help small business in Arkansas thrive. Other policies like small, constitutionally consistent government and reducing citizen dependency on government keeps it from growing and expanding its influence on our daily lives. Conduit for Commerce works every day to educate the general public and legislators on these important priorities in the name of Arkansas small business. By the way, contributions to Conduit for Commerce are tax deductible. Log on now to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Contact Us on the right side of the page. That's conduitforcommerce.org. Go there now and learn the facts on protecting small business in Arkansas.
Do you need conservative legislation killed?
Or do you need policies enacted that ensure government growth?
Then you need to get
Nephewed. Hi, I'm nephew number 1 of uncle, nephew, and nephew, attorneys at law. I'm not a lawyer, but I am a senator.
And I'm nephew number 2, and I am a lawyer and also a senator.
Are you the victim of a recent accident in which the voters in your community mistakenly elected a limited government conservative who is now actually implementing the ideas he or she campaigned on?
That's right, nephew number 1. Don't be a victim of democratic elections any longer. At Uncle, Nephew, and Nephew, we are committed to killing limited government legislation and promoting bills that increase the size of government by using any tool at our disposal.
Because sometimes the truth of the matter is, principles get in the way of pragmatism.
Just listen to some of our great testimonials.
Ever since I've been using the nephews, all my special interests have been served. As long as you make sure your contract says lobbying services are prohibited, then the legal services of uncle, nephew, and nephew are legal. Trust me, put the nephews on them.
It came out of nowhere. I was blindsided last election cycle when my well-funded and paid-for politician lost to some grassroots limited government voters. But then I hired the nephews, and they killed all the conservative policies the voters wanted. I got nephewed.
I got nephewed too, and so can you. Uncle, nephew, and nephew will accept compensation via campaign contributions. Put the nephews on them.
PHP Parody. Exposing the truth and everything the Marble Palace establishment keep trying to cover up. It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Yeah, so welcome back. So this whole issue, all right, we covered this one John Brummett opinion article about the endorsement, about people, saying, correctly so, I'm still sticking by my point of view, which is, John Brummett generally likes what Asa Hutchinson is doing. At the very least feels relieved. Oh, we at least got one of those Republicans that's reasonable. We got one of the reasonable Republicans. That's all you need to know. I mean, this is a leftist guy. And, have your opinions. Be a leftist. Be a Democrat. Do that. That's fine. But come on. I mean, elections are supposed to have consequences, but apparently not. Not in Arkansas. Status quo, still running under this Clinton machine. And, still it's like we're haunted. But here to prove my point, another editorial, another opinion piece. John Brummett, headline, Conservatism on the Line. Quote, the fundamental question, will pragmatic conservatism survive after Hutchinson? That is a quote from Jay Barth, political science professor at Hendrix College, in a column 2 weeks ago in the Arkansas Times. John Brummett writes, Governor Asa Hutchinson's challenge is to transform state government so that conservatives will be happy, but not so disrupt it that conservatives face a backlash in the state with more poverty and human needs than most. What does that mean? Governor Asa Hutchinson is to transform the state without actually transforming it. Next paragraph. It's to keep state government functioning as free of incident as it functioned during all those decades of one-party Democratic rule. Otherwise known as no recognizable change. He goes on, but it's to dare not let anything resemble too closely the same old with state government growing in budget and scope every year by inertia's assumption that more money for more programs is, of course, better. Of course, that's exactly what Asa Hutchinson believes, and we have his record to prove it. $600 million in spending increases in, the 4 years, what will be 4 years. He goes on, John Brummett, quote, Asa's assignment, the same but different, shaken up but steady as she goes, an earthquake without tremor. Again, no recognizable reform and change. He goes on. He thinks the conservative revolution of Arkansas will be healthier and live longer if he doesn't make a mess of things. Again, no real conservative change. Now, for somebody to think that, we got 1 minute left, for somebody to think that, you have to really not believe in the platform you're running on. You just use it to get elected. You talk about conservative ideas, but you don't really believe that they're going to work, and that's kind of an epidemic down at the Marble Palace. Joe, real quick, you got something?
Oh, I was going to say that there are tremors, but it's not from Asa. It's from the shaking fists of those of us who don't like Asa. We're creating tremors, and her name is Jan Morgan.
The fact that she even announced, the fact that somebody is running is a victory in and of itself. And again, just go look at her social media reach. There are grassroots people everywhere mobilizing because they just want to say, hey, it's not just about a campaign. It's about actually implementing the policies that the people want. And right now that hasn't happened. Back in a minute.
I hope he's listening. His little best buddy is cashing big checks, too, out of all that legislation.
So,
friends of legislators are cashing big checks, folks, out of legislation they pushed.
So, I mean, we're on an unsustainable trajectory. I mean, you would agree with that.
Yeah, absolutely. We are in financial trouble. It's election year, folks, so you're going to have all this stuff. You will not know till a year from now how bad things are. If the economy rebounds and has miraculous gains this next year, it might sustain it.
Yeah, the 4% growth possibly. That's something.
Yeah,
like that.
I mean, you're going to have to have that. We are so far behind because you have to understand, and this is some of the things I'm going to come out in more figures of showing how and where we're at. When Governor Huckabee left, he said he left almost $1 billion surplus. We spent almost $1.5 billion less than what Governor Hutchinson proposes, and Governor Hutchinson this last year had no surplus. he was sitting there, and I'm like, he's trying to brag about coming up with $64 million surplus next year, possibly?
Yeah, possibly.
On a $5.6 billion budget. Folks, if you wanted a 10% cushion going in next year of $5.6 billion, it would be $560 million.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so Governor Hutchinson, in the real world, and trying to have a cushion in the next year that folks have to scrimp and save and get by when things are costing so much more, like insurance, if you're working harder, paying more for less coverage while people are working less and getting 100% free insurance on Obamacare like Governor Hutchinson and John Gilmore love. But you're sitting there doing that, and if you want a 10% cushion, so Governor Hutchinson, by your own figures, you are $500 million off of what a real-world, normal, nice cushion would be going into the next year. Unacceptable.
Last question, and then we got to go. We're talking with Senator Brian King. I mean, our spending is out of control, and I'm going to go over these numbers again. His first year, we increased $133 million from the year before. Second year, 140. Third year, 160. Now, 172 is the projection. We really can't afford to do tax cuts, or significant ones for the people, when we're spending so much more money every year. I mean, right?
Yeah, and that's the truth about things. And folks, I'm going to tell you, I tell people all the time, you know what? I'm a farmer. I sit here and we have to go out. You know what you do? You cut spaces, do everything else, see what kind of, what the hay's in the barn type thing. We also don't know in our world today, what if something happens in North Korea? What about another terrorist attack? We have a never-know world. It's a dangerous world. You have to prepare for it. Asa Hutchinson has our state so financially ill-prepared for anything at all, and he goes out there and misleads people.
The intersection of conservative ideas and reality. Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
I can't help but think of it's like, welcome back to 90210 with that music. Folks, yeah, it's just, that's what that music reminds me of, that's all. Yeah, well, 80s, no, definitely like a 90s.
Well,
90210
for some reason, I get a feel like that music kind of makes me think of Top Gun. There's a certain scene where it's like kind of gives me
I can see
feel.
how you would think it's kind of Top Gun-ish.
Yeah,
because Top Gun was so cutting edge, man.
It's so good.
The music there,
love that movie.
People built on that. Okay, so the city of Springdale has a bond issue, and they're hoping that the bond issue will pass, because that's all cities. Every time that when a city goes to the taxpayers and they say, "We want you to give us more money," they obviously hope that they get more money. So it's they want to do this to give you quicker emergency response. That's what the city of Springdale says. This Lorinda Jenks over at Arkansas Online. It's printed up here. And they're wanting, let's see here, special election, Springdale residents will vote on a $200 million bond issue that would pay for projects in 5 areas. The 6th question on the ballot asks voters to renew a 1% sales tax to pay the bonds. The renewal must pass for any of the projects to be funded. Estimated costs are for the projects: $71.4 million for street improvement, $47.4 million to refinance debt, $40.8 million for a criminal justice center and renovate the city administration building, $19.4 million for parks and trails, $16.4 million. Oh man, parks and trails. You got to have those parks and trails, right? $16.4 million for 3 fire stations and $5.2 million to replace the animal shelter. So this is what cities do now. They call special elections because they want more money, and they know if they do it in a general election, they will not get what they want, more than likely, statistically. Statistically, that is exactly what the results show, right? If you look up the Arkansas Center for Research and Economics, or as what we call ACRE on the program, they have an incredible amount of data and graphics to support. Well, let me just tell you what their statistics are, okay? A low voter turnout versus high pass rates. This is a study that they did from 1981 to 2016, okay? So if the voter turnout in a general election is around 44% on average, okay, you've got in a primary, voter turnout is 26% on average. And in a special election, on average, since 1981, you have 19% voter turnout. Now, would you believe it or not, when you get that special election and you have an average of 19% voter turnout, you know the tax increase passes 77% of the time? Do you know in a primary, when you have a 26% voter turnout, you know the tax increase passes 56% of the time? But in a general election with a 44% voter turnout, the tax increase passes only 45% of the time. Now, whether or not city officials who love special elections and love, man, how would I say this? Because they're going to get mad either way. I think it's a soft tyranny. I would describe it as a soft tyranny. It is a tyrannical rule to push for special elections, in my opinion, because the city does it because they want the money, and they know that if we took a larger sampling, now they're going to say, well, you should show up to vote. Well, I'm sorry. I mean, good grief. I'm out working. I'm paying taxes. I'm trying to take care of my family. I'm sorry I missed the Tuesday special election after a 4th of July weekend. I'm sorry I forgot about that, or I'm sorry I'm not engaged in it. I mean, it's laughable for them to say, well, you should just show up. It's your responsibility to vote. No, I'm sorry. We can dictate to the government how the process and mechanisms, how they take more money from us. And the fact is, in a general election, according to the data, they've only got a 45% chance of raising your taxes because we don't like tax increases, and they know this. They'd rather have a 77% chance in a special election, and that's what the data shows. So, how do we stop this? Here's a flashback. Back during the 2017 legislative session at the Marble Palace, we had a shot. We had a shot to end special elections as we know it. There would be the only provisions would be, if you have a giant change in the status quo, a natural disaster, you need to raise money, that sort of thing, you'd be allowed to have one. But aside from that, you're looking at primaries or you're looking at general elections. That's the only way to do it. They put in, they put in fail safes in case you had to, for emergency situations. This Conduit for Action article, just show the Conduit for Action article if we can. The headline here is how State Representative James Sturch killed special election reform by walking out. Cities, counties, and school districts have special elections at random times throughout the year to raise taxes. It costs taxpayers an average of $200,000 per year to hold these elections. Taxpayers spent over $7.4 million on special elections from 1981 to 2016. Again, this ACRE study. Voter turnout for these special elections averages 19% with a 77% pass rate. During the recent legislative session, SB 723 by Senator Dave Wallace, a Republican from Leachville, would have reformed special elections to increase voter turnout and streamline election dates. Representative James Sturch, a Republican from Batesville, by the way, who's now trying to unseat Republican incumbent Linda Collins Smith. James Sturch is Governor Asa Hutchinson's boy. James Sturch is the boy that's loyal to the governor, that's loyal to his big government agenda, loyal to the policies, and that's why James Sturch walked out of special election reform. And we've got the audio and video we're going to play here in just a minute to prove it. So he helped defeat it, and it was a legislative sleight of hand maneuver. However, Conduit for Action caught it, and it's a very well-viewed video of the entire process. You can check it out at conduitforaction.org. Just search for James Sturch in the search box. It'll come up, and you'll see the headline, How He Killed Special Election Reform, and the videos on that article. To fully understand just what Representative Sturch did, one must understand what a sound the ballot challenge is. It is a procedural move in the Arkansas legislature to challenge close votes. In the House, bills are voted on by electronic buttons at each representative's seat. They can select yes, no, or present, or choose not to vote. On each bill, the Speaker will announce cast up the ballot, quote, cast up the ballot, when everyone has voted, and the total number of votes for, against, and present will display on the screen in the House chamber. And let me stop there. Just me explaining that to you, there are politicians listening, and they're saying, yeah, duh, I mean, we're there, we know the cast up the ballot phrase, we know. But you know what? Some of them are thinking, man, I wish he wouldn't tell the average person the intricacies and mysteries of the Marble Palace. See, if you were familiar with the process, the way I'm familiar with the process, what I've seen, we wouldn't be having these problems. I can promise you this, because some of the stuff I've seen and witnessed is outrageous. If everybody saw it, folks, I promise you we would throw these guys out in droves. I'm telling you. We would say, no, you're not going to lie to us anymore. You're not going to say one thing on the campaign trail and then come back with excuses about how much smarter you are now that you've been in office. And we really can't do things the way I thought we could do them. No. We either have a government that we can control as the people, or we don't. Okay, back to this. If a bill receives 51 votes, it passes. There's 100 state reps. However, if at least 5 representatives raise their hands for a sound the ballot challenge after it's passed, the parliamentarian will then call the roll of yes votes. It's like, well, Paul, why would they call the roll when they've got a screen that shows, because they do record their votes in the actual House chamber. They just don't in committees. Why would they need to sound the ballot? Well, for a yes vote to stand under a sound the ballot challenge where they call the roll, a representative must be in their seat when the name is called. Because, see, what tends to happen, and this drives me nuts, is you'll have state representatives pushing the buttons for their partners. Maybe they're not in their seat. Maybe they got to go somewhere, and they say, hey, go ahead and push yes for me on this next vote. I got to run some real quick. Well, so if you do a sound the ballot, then you got to be in your seat. They want to make sure there were actually 51 votes, which you would think that would be the case, but unfortunately it's not the case every time. So if a member is not in their seat, then their yes vote is struck, and it's subtracted from the total of the vote that just took place. For example, if a bill passes with 52 votes, at least 51 people must be in their seats when their names are called. So the video below shows exactly what transpired during this Sound the Ballot challenge. It ends with Representative James Sturch leaving his seat 28 seconds before his name is called and killing the bill after voting yes originally. You can't make this stuff up. Now, what's interesting, they've got timestamps here, okay? The timestamp here at 3:29 p.m., SB 723 passed with 52 votes. Representative James Sturch voted yes. At 3:30, the sound the ballot was called, and Representative Sturch is in his seat. He checks his phone and leans over and speaks to his seatmates. The timestamp of 3:30:45, when calling the roll, Representative Jim Dotson was first struck after he was not in his seat. Representative Dotson was truly absent from the chamber, though, during this vote, and someone else must have pushed his button. This bill now has 51 votes, and any other strike will kill the bill because it'll cease to be a majority. Timestamp of 3:31:51, as the alphabetical roll gets to the P's, Representative Sturch gets up, leaves his seat, and leaves the House chamber. And this is when the famous Sturch lurch, this is what we call the Sturch lurch, where he killed special election reform. If you're tired of special elections, and he's from Batesville, but this maneuver affects everybody in the state. I can't tell you how many special elections have taken place since then. And you can thank one representative that many of us don't have the opportunity to vote against, but a lot of people are going to vote against him, I predict, in the primary. It's just actually, it's frustrating because we had an opportunity to end governments from being able to tax us without getting a larger majority or a larger sample of how the population really feels about their government. And he killed it. He got a text message from somebody. Somebody text messaged him. And I'll tell you this. I've had people call and tell me who it was. But I don't know for sure if that's who it was. I've speculated about who it is before, if you're connected to lobbyist groups and things like that. But I have been told who it was, and I can't tell you who it is because honestly, I don't think it would just be hearsay, I guess. Unless I had proof. Let's see here. Timestamp 3:32:18. Representative Sturch's yes vote is struck because he is not in his seat when his vote. You know what? Let's listen to this. I want to give you. This is a flashback. What date was this? Do we have a date on this? I don't see the date actually in the article. But anyway, this was back towards the end of the session. This was like a couple days left in the session of 2017. Go ahead, and I'm gonna walk through this, kind of narrate this as well. This video, though, is something else. Go ahead, Joe, whenever you're ready.
The question now before the House will be the passage of Senate Bill 723. We have one pair on the desk. Representative Andy Davis votes yes. Representative Charlotte Douglas votes no. This is witnessed by Representative Sonia Barker. Representative
going.
Douglas is the present member. Are there any procedural objections to this pair?
So stop for a second. A pair, okay, means that someone who is hang on one second. I'm going to read this. A pair means someone who is absent and voting yes pairs with a no vote. So no one will vote their button. That's why they do that. They go over that before the actual vote. Okay, go ahead, Joe.
All right, please do not vote either of these two voting machines.
The Speaker of the House, Jeremy Gillum, is the voice that you're hearing. So here's the vote on special election reform last year. This was a very contentious vote. The Municipal League was like, "No, we're not going to be able to raise any more money. We're not going to be able to raise any more taxes.
Everyone voted.
If we can't do it in the special election."
Everyone voted.
Again, a 77% chance of raising taxes when it's done in a special election,
Casting
according
ballots, Mr.
to
Clerk.
study. And so it was
with 52 yeas,
52 to
35 nays, one present.
All right, there we go.
Mr. Clerk.
52.
By that vote, the bill had passed.
Bill
Mr.
passes.
Clerk, please call the roll.
All right, so there was a sound the ballot call. Stop, Joe. Sound the ballot was called. Actually, you keep going, Joe, because this is going to take a while. Each person who voted yes will have to have their name called, and they must be in their seat for their yes votes to count. Okay, that's how
Ballinger,
this goes.
Barker.
So it goes down the list.
Beck.
Yep. And then,
Bentley.
let's see here.
Boyd.
Go ahead and skip to 3:31:51 as we're getting to the P's.
Branscombe.
Okay.
Brown.
James Sturch looks at his
Cap.
phone.
Collins. Dalby.
Oh, you don't? Okay.
Dotson.
Right. So Dotson
Right,
wasn't in his
struck Mr.
seat,
Dotson.
so he struck. So now we're only at 51 votes.
Dan Douglas.
Which means whatever yes votes are not in their seat.
52, we had a pair on the desk.
Eubanks.
Still got to have one more. So, Joe,
Farrar.
when does he look at his phone?
Charlene
Has he
Fife.
looked at his phone yet?
Gates.
Going down the list here.
Gonzalez. Hammer.
You're getting kind of antsy.
Hendren. Hillman. Grant Hodges.
He started
Holcomb.
talking to somebody. Okay.
House.
You can watch this video at conduitforaction.org.
Jean.
All right. He just got a text message of some kind, we think. He
Lowry.
looked at his phone. And
Lundstrom.
we're getting to the L's.
Lynch. Mayberry.
Now he's talking to somebody else. He's probably saying, guys,
McCollum.
I'm going to have to leave and kill this bill.
Stephen Meeks.
We're to the M's now.
Miller.
Remember, his last name is Sturch.
Payton. Henzo.
And now he's up.
Pilkington.
He got to the P's. He's up. He's lurching out of the room, James Sturch.
Richmond.
And he leaves the chamber.
Rye.
Or to the R's.
Shepard.
He's now out the door.
Smith.
Oh, okay. We're close.
Sorvillo.
Okay.
Speaks. Sturch.
Strike. And
Representative Sturch will strike his name.
And the bill fails. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how special election reform failed last year. Legislative sleight of hand. He had voted for it, and then he got up right at the last minute to kill it after getting a text message from his phone. I don't know who it was from. Well, I know who people have told me it's from. We got to take a break, ladies and gentlemen. You're listening to Conduit News Radio. This video is up at conduitforaction.org. Just search for James Sturch. Matter of fact, I'm going to put it on the Facebook link right now at facebook.com/Conduit News inside our live video feed. We'll be back in just a moment.
Protecting your business means protecting your data. But is your business really prepared to handle the growing threat of things like cybercriminals and ransomware? At iTex, they're committed to deploying the best security solutions to protect your business and your bottom line. Security threats are constantly evolving. So are security needs. Be proactive now and equip your business with the best cybersecurity available with iTex. Call them today for a free consultation at 870-336-9778. That's 870-336-9778 or itexusa.com.
It's a PHP parody.
Hey, man. You got any of that marble rock?
Yeah, I've got the hookup.
Thanks. I need a fix real bad. I'm itching to grow some government.
How much you need?
I'm gonna need a taxpayer's dime bag.
No problem, sir. 1 taxpayer dime of marble rock. Enjoy.
Thanks, man. They don't call it Little Rock for nothing. Am I right?
Did you know your state representative or state senator may be addicted to growing government? The drug is called marble rock, and too much of it will cause marble fever. Watch for the warning signs. Does your legislator suddenly display a lack of humility when faced with basic questions? Does he or she suddenly develop hubris and pride that was not present during the campaign for office? These are signs they might be smoking the terrible drug, marble rock. The solution? Detox. Vote for detox. Vote to send them home for their own good. Warning! Some politicians once voted out of office will not go home and stay in Little Rock to get their fix by lobbying, also known as the Burris Syndrome.
PHP parody.
Need your daily news fix?
Yeah.
Don't forget to tune in to Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, tomorrow on the program at 6:30, we'll be talking to the head of the Arkansas Dog Hunters Association, Mr. Jeremy Sullivan. He's always a treat to have on. It'll be during our Patriots of Act 746 segment, so certainly stick around for that. Also, I believe tomorrow we also have scheduled around 7:30, State Senator Mr. Gary Stubblefield be calling in. We'll be talking to Gary. Always love to talk to him about everything that's going on. So certainly don't want to miss tomorrow's show. Obviously, as well as news and events we'll be covering also. So at some point, hopefully today, we'll be making a a careful. I want, I guess, a carefully crafted language warning. So anytime that we have to talk about anytime we're like, Asa Hutchinson said this, it was another example of carefully crafted language. So anytime that happens, I want the ability to play like an air raid siren. You know what I'm saying? So anytime that would be good. Sorry, that's me. That was my computer there, and I've got my Facebook feed going. So like this right here would be kind of nice, of like an air raid siren, and then it's like you do like a warning. Is it too soon from the Hawaii thing? I just thought about that. Maybe. All right. Anyway, give me the air raid siren. So you do the air raid siren, and you just this is a carefully crafted language. This is not an this is not a drill. This is a carefully crafted language emergency. Politicians are deceiving you. Their weapons of choice are the English language. Joe says it's too soon. It's too soon. No, whatever. Anyway, we're gonna do this. I'm gonna make. I want to have something for people, you guys, the listeners, know, okay, what is it? Because in a way, you have to, be trained to look for the carefully crafted language of Governor Asa Hutchinson. And I want you to remember, it was John Brummett in his piece that we went over at the beginning of the article. He actually used the word carefully and craftily. But it was Asa Hutchinson when he was asked a tough question back in 2015. And he said, this is what he said. He didn't want to give a straight answer. And so instead he referred everybody back to his remarks. And it was about carefully crafted language, where he said,
I want to refer everybody back to my remarks because that's the key language that was carefully crafted.
Yeah, carefully crafted language. That's where we came up with our whole segment. He's the one that started, first of all, why can't we just have straight talk? Why can't you just level with us? You may disagree with, limiting government and conservatism. Just he should have just said that. Instead, carefully crafted language suggests, it's just propaganda. It's like, okay, well, this stinks of propaganda, and you're just trying to manipulate how you appear to us instead of how you actually are. Folks, we'll be back tomorrow. This has been Conduit News Radio. I'm Paul Harrell, Arkansas. Be safe.